started to think of the things that I've noticed that I say on the air that I would never type. And it's really great when you start listening to yourself, because you think, I don't say that, do I? And you hear these things. One thing that I hear a lot of people do, and I caught myself doing it a lot, is just you'll say somebody that did something instead of somebody who did something. And when you'd write it, you'd always say who.
You see, this is what we do. First of all, I hate watching myself on TV, or I see every line, every wrinkle, every hair that's out of place. And look I don't care anymore. We're in the house these days. Everything is different. So you have to take it down. You, I know you so well. You have to take it down a notch. But I am just as bad, and I'm listening to you, which is helping me, because I too go through the same nonsense. Oh my God, look at this, look at this, look what I said, open mouth, insert foot, and then, no, I don't want to face the public anymore. But this is all immaterial. I mean, this goes against the grain of everything you and I stand for. People don't even listen to our words. Words only count 7%. Wasn't it Morabian in the 50s who did that study? And it was replicated again and again and again. Body language is the most important thing. Body language counts 55%. Your intonation counts 38%. And the words are only a minuscule 7%. To those of us who memorize things right before a presentation. It's nonsense.
Well, it makes sense when you're talking about giving speeches and stuff, but when you're talking to somebody now in webinars, maybe there's no camera, where there's different things. People are communicating in new ways now, and if it's all body language, then what do you do when you're on the radio? What do you do?
Well, it makes it rough. Everybody is an expert on having a radio show and developing radio concepts and content. I am, of course, television, so I'm very concerned about body language. But even on radio or on the phone, the studies that have been done show that the phone, your intonation on the telephone counts 78%, and then the words are whatever's left over. And that's very minuscule in comparison. It's your intonation, it's your drive, it's the things that people connect with. And we've been saying this for years and years and years, but we don't think about it. You see yourself, certainly I've seen myself on movie screens. Oh my God, that is screaming. Oh my God, oh no, in a movie thing.
Nothing like high def, nothing like high def.
And you're worried about whether
it's hard not to get critical, but you have to think it's how you make people feel too. You know what I mean? It's what they go away with, to have the message. I mean, in general, it's not really so much how you said it. It's how you made them feel, the way that they've connected to you. And it's really easy to get hung up on all the little things. And maybe that's the professor in me. I want to go through and take the red marker and mark out all you should have said it this way. You should have said it that way. But sometimes when you're on the fly, it's like in a bar when you're talking to somebody, or at a restaurant or whatever, you're not perfectly aligning every sentence to, be grammarly checked to every, that's a site I like. We don't get promotion for, but I put everything through Grammarly in case anybody ever wants to check what their grammar is. It was great. But I think, when you're in real life, you don't really put that kind of focus on every single as you think about it when you're on these shows.
Nor does the listener. The listener is in one ear, out the other, and that's it. It's over. It's finished.
Well, there's so much that people say now that you never said in the past. Everything was censored and everything, you can say just about anything on a podcast. It's really interesting to me of what kinds of topics, but I try to get away from the really controversial stuff though.
And I try to get away with.
I know. So if somebody wants to start their own show, would you have to balance, if you're more like how Gilda is and you're going for the draw of the, that's a very powerful thing to go controversial, but you got to be able to live with what people say about what you said though.
Well, that is so true.
Yeah.
If you go controversial and
Yeah.
then you want to find a hole to bury yourself in, no, so you don't see
You're in
another.
the wrong business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole different story. But most of us do make errors when we speak. I mean, grammatical errors,
Yeah.
and because we're speaking in colloquial terms. And so, hey, you do the best you can, but you've also, everything is now real, real, real. It started with reality television, which is not even
That's
reality.
not real. Yeah.
It's so highly scripted and highly edited, and it's not reality at all. But it started with that, and there was a reason that it started with that, because people were trying to get away from all these scripts that were phony,
Yeah.
and the reality programming immediately replaced the soap operas. There are only a few soap operas left, and I used to write for Soap Opera Digest, so
Yeah.
I was up on all of that. But things have changed dramatically, and people want to feel as though you're connecting. Now, how does that make you? Well, I hate to say, how does it make you feel? Because I know on all of the metrics, you come out with less feeling and more cogitation.
Right.
So how does it sit with you?
I'm not sure what you're asking. How does what sit with me?
Um, Connecting with people's feelings. That was the first time, by the way, Diane, that I had ever heard you say, well, it's how you make people feel. I was surprised that that was coming out of your mouth.
Well, believe it or not, I study the emotional aspect of it as part of my research. You know what I mean? And so there goes the professor part. But I think I've had so many professional speakers on the show, and no matter what, when you talk to them afterwards, they all will tell you different pieces of advice. And it's a lot of it is it's the way you make them feel. I've heard from them, but a lot of it is women tend to want to mind dump sometimes because we have so much that we want to share and we have so much to tell people that we'll just get up there and just tell everything that we want to say and say it really fast and get out there. And men are just more into the entertainment aspect. And I found that really interesting. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I have studied the different mechanisms in female and male brains and how we enunciate our communiques to different audiences.
Right.
One of the things is that women are so detail oriented. I mean, I make fun of it in many of my books and many of my speeches that I give, and I say, well, he comes home from work at night and she comes home from work at night. And he says to her, how was your day? And she said, oh, and I went here and I went there and this happened and this happened and this happened. And he's like, whoa, I need to
checked out a long time ago.
I need to chill out. And before I can even, I have to compose myself before I can even address any of this.
Right.
So I, having been married, having been in relationships, I knew better. And I created this whole concept when my husband came home and he said, how was your day? I routinely then asked, after I let him know what all the studies had shown, I routinely asked, would you like it in male talk or female? And then we'll always say, just give me the bottom line. Just give me male talk.
I really don't care. Yeah.
Oh, you don't care about all that. For that, you have to have your girlfriends. And girlfriends are very important for us. And those women who dump their girlfriends because they're finally in love and having a guy in their lives, that is the worst thing that they can do. So women are far more detail oriented than men are. I gave a speech before some dentists. I mean, dentists.
The way you say that, dentist.
Well, they're used to talking at somebody because somebody is, they can't respond. So they're used to it. But this guy came up, one of the dentists, after I was finished speaking, and he said, you really clarified everything. Now I know why always telling my wife, you speak too much. You talk too much. I said, you see, and I also take care of all the marital strife, just in one fell swoop. And he really appreciated that because he thought she was talking too much, whereas all the studies suggest that men talk more than women do. But
It's interesting. Well, on the radio, you get to the point where you have to, when you're asking questions, let your guests speak, and it's really interesting to me to see the balance of who talks and how much they talk. And actually, I was interviewed this morning on somebody else's show, and he asked me how I would define curiosity, and I gave him my answer. And then I said, how would you define it? And you could tell he wasn't used to somebody asking him a question on his show, And I'm like, oh, that's my radio show host in me. But it's the balance, though, when you're interviewing somebody, knowing how to let people speak in a certain amount of time. And you might notice, even as you and I talk, we sometimes interrupt each other, and that's okay. We do that on the radio. We do it more in TV probably than radio, but you want to have bite-sized bits. Sometimes I'll have people on the radio and it'll be 20 minutes and I'm like, I'm trying to get something out there to ask them, and those are actually easy shows as a guest, as a host. But I think the better shows,
let them blah, 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 blah,
yeah,
blah.
but I think the better shows are when if you're going to be a guest, you want to have the back and forth. Yeah. And you don't want to put your host on the spot too much, and you don't, and I that wasn't my intention by asking him a question back. It was to go back and forth and have that repartee. You want that.
You want that. Definitely you want that.
It's different on television though sometimes, because you have very limited time. And you might have 1 minute to say something instead of 30 minutes of
1 minute, like 6 seconds. Okay, we're going to close in 3, 2, 1, over.
That's actually the hardest part for me. And I don't know how this is for you. I can imagine it's probably the easiest part for you. But when I'm doing my radio show, everything that's the hardest for me is always the easiest for you. Whenever I'm have to read something into the teleprompter or say something that's scripted or something that just not off the top of my head, I can't do it. I'll have to record it 3-4 times, because when I'm on the air and I'm talking to you like this, I have no problem. But as soon as it's something I have to say exactly the way that they want me to say it, I get all tongue-tied, and it's really hard for me. Reading bios and all that, I'll look at it a couple times, and now, when you're on TV, I watch them when I'm on TV shows. They'll come back from break and they'll look at them and they'll go, yeah, next we're going to talk, and they'll go off and they'll just have this ramble, and they have no problem just coming up with what they want to say. Is that an art? How do you get like that?
Prompters. They have cards.
These girls didn't, though. I watched them. They didn't have anything.
Sometimes they have cards being held up by people where you cannot see them, and they'll say, do this, say this, go there. And one of the things about television that makes it so interesting to me is that you have to have your eyes here and there and here and there. You have to be so aware of everything that's happening. And the camera captures your eyes. Yeah. And you can always tell if somebody is lying or telling some
looking the wrong way.
Exactly. Because the camera captures that. I mean, how you and audiences are very smart. They've become very sophisticated in seeing how people respond. You could tell a lot just from responses. So, but on TV, you have to be aware of all these things. One of the things that you had brought up, and I always consider when I speak to you, is that you always say radio is so much easier because you have your notes in front of you. You can always refer to your notes. Television, you're on air naked.
It's harder. Yeah.
You have to have
dance.
Really, you have to be tap dancing and doing stuff that is so interesting while you're coming up with something. One time I had developed this I think it was 4-part series. It was an acronym that I developed. And I was in front of an audience, and I said, S is smile. It was, I call it the sofa technique. Smile, open your posture, forward lean, and acknowledge what the audience is responding to you with. So I was doing S, O, F. Oh my God, I blanked.
Uh-huh.
Live audience. I said, and I'm in front of them. This is not television. This is
Uh-huh.
presentation. It was a big keynote, and I said, F. Now, does anybody in the audience, immediately I pivoted. I said, does anybody else,
You have to. Yeah.
anybody think of what F stands for? Somebody came up with something and somebody else came up with something. I said, not really, not really. And then my mind came back
Yeah.
and I find.
Happens a lot. Yeah.
And you have to be able, again, the word style flex.
You have to draw. I mean, you can always call out the elephant in the room, man. I just forgot what I was going to say. And people are forgiving. They just, and then what you said about the camera catches everything was interesting to me, because right now we're on Zoom and we're side by side or up and down or whatever it does, right? In the past, it depends. Before I knew the settings, it would just show the guest who was speaking, and then when I would speak, I would come on, and when they would speak, it would go back and forth.
Yes.
And I wish I had my reactions on this one, because I had this one guy on my show, and he was a facial recognition kind of guy. He would tell you your body posture, what it meant, everything.
Oh, lovely.
And afterwards, after the show was over, we did a little Zoom one-on-one like this, and he read who I was. He told me he did a reading for me or whatever it was. And he starts off and he goes, well, you're what my wife would call striking. He goes, but not in a pretty way. Or he put it like that. And then I'm thinking, and I'm wondering what my face did, you know what I mean? Because if somebody says that, you're like, what am I, freaky looking? You go to the worst thing sometimes, when somebody says something.
But that's sandwiched with a not too complimentary.
No, it was. I don't think he meant it how it came out. You know what I mean? I think he was trying not to flirt, and he kind of put it in a way. He was trying to be complimentary. It came across, but it was so oddly worded that I think my face, I was like, you know what I mean? And some of with the Zoom now, it's always on you, so it's catching all of your reactions on these shows, and it's kind of funny because if you go through and you watch how people react to stuff. In fact, I did that to you on one of our promo pictures, because you're so animated and you're so fun, because half the time you're like, oh, and you're doing these great faces and things, and I love that.
Intentional. I went to a plastic surgeon. I had a terrible accident, and I lost a tooth, and the lip was all swollen and fallen and what. So I went to a plastic surgeon to fix my lip, and he told me he wasn't going to fix it because it was too dangerous. He couldn't guarantee that it was any whatever. But then when he was looking at my face, he said, I have been in practice for 25 years. I have never seen such an expressive, animated face. I said, oh, that probably means I'll be in here a lot in the years to come.
So let me give you a little Botox to get rid of that.